to the NES Game Maker. Today we are going to skip ahead a little bit here, right to the Object Music Manager, which I'm sure a lot of you have been looking forward to, because this is actually something I've heard a lot of people asking about, and they want to know how can they handle music in their game, and this is a way that I have come up with. So let's get cracking with this. So last time I showed you guys how to use the library object functions, which has a bunch of functions related to various different objects in the game. And I should mention that this is actually kind of deprecated because what I can actually do is I'm going to turn these into methods maybe. But at the same time, no, I think I'll keep, I guess I'll keep them here because then I could do position camera as opposed to if I made it methods and I have to do object camera dot position camera. You know, I don't want to have to do that. I like just having the ability to call it like a function. So never mind that. It was a brief thought that crossed my mind and then immediately got squashed. You know, I have those a lot. So let's create a music manager object. Come into here, create magic object music underscore manager. Open it up, doesn't need to be visible, set it to persistent, give it a sprite, game object sprite, and give it a music. Main reason for these game objects is because they just look nice on the sidebar here for the most part. There's no real need for, I should come up with something for init though, you know, but unfortunately I don't really have any idea for it. If you have a good idea, leave a comment behind, that'd be fun. And I would draw a sprite especially for you. Anyway, so let's close this. Make sure you're good. As for object stats, we're not really going to use it because it turns out that under 2.3 we don't really need it anymore because now we can use a struct instead of a object for our stats. So let's come over here. We're going to need a create event, and let me pull up my code over here. We're also going to need some cleanup events. We're going to need a end step event. And this actually doesn't really matter. You can use begin or step or end step. I don't know which. Actually, I think that you probably can't use begin step. But you can use the step and end step. Alarm is 0. User event 0. And last but not least, we're going to need async save load. All right. So what are we doing here? Well, let's zoom it in the code a little bit first. And come over here to your tools, audio groups, and make sure that you create some audio groups here. So we're going to need a new one. Call it music. And create another one. Call it SFX. And come back over here to our default, and everything that has music needs to be moved to music. Everything that's SFX needs to be moved to SFX. Yeah, it wasn't that easy. That's useful to know about, you know, just being able to right click them and move them over to the new audio groups. That's very useful for organizing quickly instead of having to come into all your sound objects and go, I want this to be a audio group music and having to open up each and every single one of these and do that. There we go. Got some of that traditional Zelda music there going on. All right, so let's go into our code here. We're going to start again with the singleton check if you need it. And we're going to get going with some properties here. We need our now playing property, our previous track property, our loop back from point. It doesn't necessarily have to be set to no one, and probably shouldn't because we're actually doing a integer here. So instead of no one, it should be undefined, or let's see, what's undefined? What's the proper? I don't have a value function for numbers, because there is one. So like for any sort of instance, you should use no one when there is no applied instance to that variable. But for numbers, I think it is just undefined. We'll just go with that for now. But if I can remember proper one, I'll remember to say it in the future. Then audio ID, no one again. And load the audio groups. So what we're going to do here is we're going to trigger alarm 0 with a 1 frame delay, just like with the object camera. We have a 1 frame delay for triggering the Windows Sentry event. Otherwise, it doesn't like you for whatever reason. And let's go to our alarm 0 here. And what we're going to do is call audio group load music and audio group load SFX. So what does this do? So typically your game, when it compiles, it will load all of the sound and every single sound that is in the default audio group all at once. And that can slow down the loading time for your game, especially if you have lots of large sound files like in some games with high quality art and sound. You know, their music can be like a whole gigabyte or something, because it has like I don't know, multi-channel support and stuff. But in the case of GameMaker here, so what we can do instead of having everything load under the default music group is create our own music groups and then tell those music groups to load when we want them to. So you could have like a music group for, hey, this is level 1 music, so let's load all the music for level 1 because it's big music and we don't want to be hogging all of the per player's RAM, because that's where it all goes. It all gets loaded into the RAM. So if you know, this is a great way to reduce the amount of resources you're using if you have a game and you want to make it as compact as possible for something like a mobile game, for example, or an HTML5 game or something. So in this case, we have our music group and our SFX group. And the main reason why I'm using these actually is because then what this also does is it allows us to have independent audio controls for the music and the SFX. So we can have as I demonstrate right here, music volume and SFX volume. So if we come back to our default script, we have those set up to be 0.25 because they get kind of noisy. I'm actually going to trim it down even further to 1.1 because I want to make sure that you hear my voice instead of hearing all the music and sound effects when we're putting those into the game. You can actually, so like I said, you can control the volume independently for each one of those, giving you the option to, if you want to make an option menu for the players, you can then control your music volumes and your sound effects volume. We even have a settings.ini file, and this focus is actually fairly useful as well. So this focus is a variable that we are going to use to set up so that when the game is not focused, it pauses the music, and you can actually continue that to pause the game entirely when you're not in focus. You know, that's definitely a possibility, and that's something you can also put into your options menu, like if you want the player to be able to choose if the game pauses when they're not focused on the game. And then we go, if a file exists, file name, then let's open our text file. So if settings.ini exists, let's open up our file. And while we haven't reached the end of the line, read through all the, read all the lines from that file into this variable underscore line. And if a string position music volume underscore line, so what it does is then it searches through this string for music volume. And if it doesn't find it, then if it finds it, it sets music volume to the real value that is at that position. So if you had in the file, when it saves, it would save something like music volume, then you'd have a 30, not 32, it'd be 1.0 or something like that. So then in this case, what it does here is it just reads that 1.0 from the line because it's telling it to read a reel from that line. And same thing for the SFX volume. And then advance the line to the next line. So yeah, we're reading over each line, checking to see if it says music volume. If it does, read out the volume that we want and the sound effects volume, then move on to the next line. And once we get to the end of the file, while not file underscore text underscore end file, then we say file underscore text underscore close file name. So that's actually how you would set up an INI file, just in general. So now you can do this for yourself in the future. You can set up any property that you want. You could have, like I said, pause when lost focus. You'd have a 1 or a 0 or something like that there. And 1, of course, evaluates as true when you read it. So you can then say if this value is true, then then pause when the game loses focus, and other stuff like that. Any other setting you can think of. I'm sure if you go into any other modern game, you can find plenty of different settings to mess around with. Anyway, so yeah, make sure you remember to close your file, otherwise you end up with a file left lying around open, and well, for one thing, that limits the amount of files you can have open because you can only have like 12 files or something like that open at a time. But secondly, it kind of causes a memory leak because now you have that file open in the RAM, and you don't want to have that happen. So make sure you remember to close your files afterwards. Then I set the audio group gain for music and the SFX groups to the volume that we want, with the time span of 0. This is how long it'll be, how many frames it takes to reach that. And in this case, we want 0, so instantaneously. All right, so that's the create event so far. Remember, of course, leave a comment if any of that stuff doesn't make sense to you. So let's go over here to our cleanup event real quick. We're just like any other RAM sort of thing, you want to remember to unload your music and sound effects when you destroy this object for whatever reason. So in this case, if I were to do a game restart, then it would remember to, oh yeah, I've just been destroyed because we did a game restart, so I should probably destroy the music and the sound effects. And then when we get back to the init room again, we can recreate the object and it'll reload it all again. So, and that's important because we need the async save load to advance on to the next part of the game. So let's come over here to our end step. Here's where a lot of the magic in this happens. I mean, we've already had a lot of magic going on, but there's even more over here. So what we're going to do here is we want to control our music at this time, because we have this great stuff going on here, but we're not really doing too much with it. Let's come on to our libObject functions real quick. So here's some special functions I came up with. So this one would be audio play sound ext. It lets you play the sound plus control the gain and the pitch of that sound at the same time, which typically you'd have to call those all as separate objects. So that's really fun and useful. This is kind of old. There's some updates I could do with this with the latest GameMaker by setting it to like equals no one by default. But actually that wouldn't even be right because these are values, so that'd be undefined. But even then, I don't even have to do that, because by default, a value that doesn't have a setting, so if they don't pass in these variables, it will just be set to undefined by default. So what I could do is set these to undefined. Change that to undefined because that's more proper. And now you don't even have to pass these at all. They just they can. In fact, we just all I don't even need to say that. Just how would I go about this? For one thing, GameMaker likes to throw that around optional variables like so. And yeah. So audio play sound XT, sound ID, priority loops, gain, pitch. Then if these are not passed in, also I'm just trying to figure out, okay, well, no, you can't skip over this and only pass in pitch. That's just a normal thing. You can't do that anyways. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't end up with some weird thing like you can do that. So yeah, we'll just leave this as is, not used, and pass undefined for the variable. So that should work fine. All right. Anyways, so yeah, that's just me messing around with some live programming. You can see why I tried to avoid it, because I tend to do a lot of rambling whenever I do anything live. So anyways, we have the audio play sound EXT. We also have audio play sound variant, which is a fun one where you can mess around with the pitch min max and the gain min max to kind of get a random random sound within this range. It's especially good for stuff like random footsteps. But the ones we're going to actually really care about are cue new songs. So let's say we want to cue a new song. So we'd say something like cue underscore new underscore song and music underscore battle music priority 1. As far as priority goes, that's you can use that to define certain sound channels. So if you had like you can actually in the settings somewhere you can set how many sound channels you have, and I think currently it's 128 or something by default. But like in the NES, I think they only had 8 sound channels. So if you were to set the sound channels to 8, then you could say this is a priority 1. We always want the music to be playing, but then you could have a bunch of different sound effects all be priority 2 instead, and then they would all get shunted off to additional sound channels. But once you fill up all 8 sound channels, then new sounds would overwrite the old sounds, or be the old sounds. Yeah, no, it'd be the new sounds would overwrite the old sounds as needed. So that's how you use priority property. Typically, I just say priority 1 for everything because, as I said, there's 128 sound channels in GameMaker by default, so it's not very likely you're going to have 128 sounds playing at the same time anyway, so you should be good. Loops, you just set false because we'll take care of that in some other ways. And fade length, this is if we're going to do like a fade in, fade out. So let's see. Fade length. Where do I use fade length? Yeah. So if we're gonna fade in, do a crossfade between the the currently playing song and the new song, then we'd say something like I want it to last for a sec, so 60 frames. So we have this cue new song, sound ID, priority, loops, fade length. You find the fade length. So if argument count is equal to 4, then fade length is equal to sec. So this is another one of those things that kind of used to doesn't need to be done anymore. Like I said, you can now set that to have a default value. So we'll just set it to 0 by default. And I have set up so that it's fade length times a sec. So we just get rid of this little bit and just say fade length equals fade length times sec. So by default, it's 0. Otherwise, it is whatever in seconds you set it for. All right. Use the music manager for variable wrapping. So what we do is we are going to be using the music manager here with all this, the cue new song function. And what we're going to say is if now playing does not equal sound ID, so remember we set up over here these variables. So if the currently playing song does not equal the song that we currently said, okay, cue new song, then, oh, we want to cue a new song. So in that case, then we set audio sound gain of now playing to 0 by fade length. So that tells it to fade out the whatever's currently playing. And we set the previous track to now playing. And we set now playing equal to the new song with priority of whatever priority, loop by whatever looping you had. And audio ID is equal to sound ID. So we're going to use that function, that variable eventually. Crossfade implementation, audio sound gain of now playing. So start off our music at 0, then tell it to fade up to our music volume by the fade length. And audio sound gain, previous track to 0 by fade length. So we tell the previously playing song to fade out. And then we update loop back points. So event user 0, and we'll set up that. So loop back points. What are loop back points? So let's say you want to have a song automatically loop itself. So in this case, we have the music overworld, and the overworld music sounds great, and so on. But once we get to 166, so 166 milliseconds of play time, we want that music to loop back to 15 milliseconds of play time. So what we do here is we set the loop back from to 166, loop back to 15. And again, those are the instance of me using no ones when I should have used undefined. Because I only really started thinking about how I should properly do that recently. Okay. So let's see. Next up, we have here the loopback and return now playing. So we return the ID of the song that we've queued up in case we need to use it for whatever reason. You don't necessarily have to actually do anything with this. You just call the function. But if you did for some reason need to know the ID of the song that's playing, you definitely can do that. So there we go. Coming back to our end step here, because we passed right over that. What we want to do is, there we go. Stretch that out a little bit. If the audio is playing previous track and the audio gain for the previous track is less than 0.01, so if the audio gain is so low that nobody can hear it, then stop the previous track, because otherwise it would just keep playing, but it would be at volume 0. And we don't want that to be going on that way, because if you were to do something like pause all music and then restart all music and set the music volume of everything to whatever music volume is, you would end up with multiple soundtracks playing at the same time, because the old songs would still be playing in the background. But especially if they were looped. But yeah. All right, so kill our previous track. Kill the previous track once the fade out is over. So what do we want to do next? We want to update our loopback points. So if now playing does not equal no one and loopback from does not equal no one. So in this case, I've changed that to undefined if I were to set this up more properly. So for loopback. If our audio track position of our currently playing song is greater than or equal to loopback from, then set the track position to loopback to. This has a slight problem in that it's not working asynchronously, so you could have some potential of tailing at the far end where it plays slightly further than you actually want it to by a note or two. I think it probably depends on how fast the music is and how accurately you set up the loop backup positions. But I'm no expert in this, so this is just what I've heard from people. I haven't actually crafted any songs to such an extent where I was really serious about trying to get it exactly perfect every single time. Even these are just kind of random guesses. I wasn't really actually trying to be too accurate with it. Just saying, oh, at this point, I should probably loop back to around here, and it gives you something roughly right. Anyways, so that's our loopback setup for looping our music infinitely. And what this does is, so you can craft your music so that it will repeat infinitely properly if you want. But you could also just use this system, and then you don't even have to do that. You can just have a song, and if you know where you want to loop back from and loop back to, it'll work. So it's very simple, very easy. Works probably really good most of the time. I don't know if it'll work every single time, but like if you were doing some sort of Dance of the Necro, Crypt of the Necro Dancer type thing, I don't know if this would be the best solution for that, but it definitely works for this, as far as I can tell. So last but not least, window focus. So if window doesn't have focus, then audio pause all, focus equals false. And if we currently don't have focus and the window does have focus, then audio resume all, and focus is equal to true. This is so that we don't end up triggering this every single frame. That's why we have the focus variable there. All right. So that's focus covered. We got the loopbacks covered. Previous track now playing. Audio ID. Audio ID. Did I ever cover what audio ID is for? No, because I don't even remember what it's for. Let's see. Maybe it's actually in the asynchronous section. No, it isn't. Let me Control Shift F over here. Audio underscore ID. Oh, wait. That's right. I completely forgot it there. Audio ID is used to check for where a loopback should be, or what our loopback should be. All right, so let's go final bit here, asynchronous save load, because remember we were coming over here and we were triggering as part of our create event. We were telling it to set the gain and more importantly over here in alarm 0 to load the music in the audio groups. The music loading, however, is not instantaneous. It does take a little bit of time, so you have to check for the music load in the async save load event. Just like we set up the gamepad, we have our async load event and async group number. And we say, okay, well, if there was a async load, then if both of our audio groups are loaded, let's do a transition from the init room to the title room. And let's create that room real quick. Rooms. Where's rooms? Oh, that is. Arm underscore title. All right. And let's just real quick here. .256 by 240. And we can ignore all the other stuff. But we are going to set the grid to 8 by 8. And to make it easier to discern, we'll give it a blue background for the moment. So let's give this a try to see if it works. I've set the transition to 2 here, but you might want to put it like 4 or something because it might be a little bit faster. As I mentioned, around 8, it's basically instantaneous at that point. At 4, it's like a couple frames at all for the transition. There we go. So there it is. Once the audio groups load, it transitions us to the title. And that is where we are going to go next time on the NESGameMaker. We're going to get the title going, as everybody remembers this. Fun little background. Where are you at? There we go. Yeah, that's right. The title background. And it even has a little star falling in the background there, which for some reason I didn't set up. I don't think I did, because I used an object instead of the star there. I think I didn't bother with animating it. I'll get back. I'll see what I did when I look at it later. Oh, by the way, let's come over here to the music real quick. I want to make sure you know this because this is kind of an historic thing that not very many people know about with GameMaker. How do you use your music objects properly? This is something everybody should know. So in the case of music, so what I have here is this music file, and the music file that is associated with this is a .mp3 file, or so you can really use most any music type, but GameMaker natively prefers .mp3 and .ogg for music as a compressed file format, and even then it converts the .mp3 to .ogg anyways when you compile your game. As you can see, decoding OGG music title, music.mp3. Yeah, that's it. Basically, going through and converting everything in the OGG music from there. So it had the music title MP3, converted it into OGG when you compiled it, and then it's decoding it again. So if you want to slightly increase the speed of your compile times, just save everything as .ogg in the first place, and that'll help you out a little bit there. But let's see. So as far as it goes with music, in our case, what we want to do is we want to uncompress on load, because we're loading the music into our memory. And what that does is then lets it, once it loads, we uncompress it. That way the music can play as fast as possible, so it doesn't have any hitching from the game having to unload or to uncompress the music file. And that's one of the advantages of loading your audio groups, because then you can do that, and it saves saves on CPU use in game. So your CPU doesn't have to suddenly say, "Oh wait, I need to uncompress this music and use it." Plus, it means that you don't end up with like a small hitch in music as it tries to unload the song. So that's something you should do, definitely. So, but as far as it goes with the SFX activate dialogue, just a little bleep sound. In this case, it's just a .wav file, and .wav file should be set as uncompressed, not strained, because they are not compressed anyways. So that's all you need to worry about. And you could just leave these alone for the most part, unless you specifically know about what the properties are for each one of these things. Yeah. Like if you know that your music has stereo or is some sort of 3D audio track, that I have never actually, I don't even know what a 3D audio track is. I've never used it. But yeah, so you're going to want uncompressed for dot waves, uncompress unload for OGG or MP3. And with the compressed not streamed, if I remember correctly, it is you will try to use the compressed file without and unload it on the fly. And that, like I said, could lead to some hitching if your music files are particularly big. And compressed streamed is for if you have a music file that's really, really big and you don't want to actually try to load it into RAM, you just want to read it from the hard drive. And also, it can be used for stuff like if you are loading the file from the internet or something like that. I don't know if you can actually do that with music. I know you can do it with graphics, but I don't know so much about the music. Anyways, so yeah, that's my big music tips there for you. And I think that's about everything we got. Oh, dang, it looks like we went really over when I decided to go over with this. If you want to support me, if you think this code has helped you in any way, don't forget to possibly join up with the Patreon. Get yourself a custom title if you hang out on my server, my Discord server, and get yourself a name recognition in end credits, which I don't have set up yet, but I'll get around to it eventually. And just other little perks depending on what you go for. So thank you, everybody, and good luck with your programming.